The Senate will come to order. I ask everyone present to please rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In the absence of clergy, let us bow our heads in a moment of silent reflection or prayer. Reading of the Journal.
In Senate, Saturday, January 11, 2025, the Senate met pursuant to adjournment. The Journal of Friday, January 10, 2025, was read and approved. On motion, the Senate adjourned.
Without objection, the Journal stands approved as read. Presentation of petitions, messages from the Assembly, messages from the Governor, reports of standing committees, reports of select committees, communications and reports from state offices, motions and resolutions. Senator Gianaris.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. On behalf of Majority Leader Stewart Cousins, I hand up the following committee assignments of the Majority Conference and ask that it be filed with the Journal.
The hand-up is received and shall be filed in the Journal.
On behalf of Majority Leader Stewart Cousins, in consultation with Senator Ort, I hand up the following committee and conference assignments of the Minority Conference and ask that that also be filed in the Journal.
The hand-up is received and shall be filed in the Journal. Senator Gianaris.
Please call on Senator Salazar for an introduction.
Senator Salazar, for the purposes of an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. President. The A24 film Sing Sing, starring Colman Domingo, tells a story of the real-life program Rehabilitation Through the Arts, or RTA, a New York-based organization whose mission is to help people in prison develop critical life skills through theater and the arts, modeling an approach to the criminal legal system based on human dignity rather than on punishment. RTA demonstrates that an approach that centers human dignity and rehabilitation is more effective in our society than one based on retribution. While the national average recidivism rate is far too high in this country, at 60% of individuals returning to prison after incarceration, the recidivism rate among RTA members is less than 3%, a small fraction of that, demonstrating the remarkable positive impact of the RTA program. The film highlights the transformative impact of educational and artistic programs as tools for change inside jails and prisons, a theme that aligns with much needed expansion of programs like RTA in New York's prisons. I would be remiss if I didn't take this moment to bring attention to the recent brutal lynching by corrections staff of a man named Robert Brooks, a man who was killed while incarcerated at Marcy Correctional Facility. I bring this up now because acknowledging the impact of this film, Sing Sing, is an opportunity to highlight our commitment to taking bold steps together to end the existing culture of violence and impunity in our state prisons and to enact effective measures to bring accountability and justice for the long-standing pattern of violations of human rights of those incarcerated in New York. RTA's approach and success are evidence that the system does not have to be this way. The Sing Sing film demonstrates that a better approach to criminal justice is possible. The film takes place and was filmed in part at Sing Sing Correctional Facility, and most of the film's cast is composed of formerly incarcerated actors, including those who were members of the RTA program during the time in which they were incarcerated at Sing Sing. Present today with us in the gallery are the interim executive director of RTA, the director of programs and operations, the RTA board chair, and an RTA board member, as well as 4 of the actors from the film Sing Sing by A24 Films. Thank you for sharing your extraordinary and valuable work with us.
Thank you, Senator Salazar. To our guests, we welcome you on behalf of the Senate. We extend to you all of the privileges and courtesies of this House. Please rise and be recognized. Senator Gianaris.
Mr. President, there's a concurrent resolution at the desk. I ask that the title be read only and move for its immediate adoption.
Secretary will read.
Senate Resolution Number 9 by Senator Stewart Cousins, concurrent resolution of the Senate and Assembly proposing to implement, pursuant to, and in compliance with the provision of Article 7 of the Public Officers Law, the system of video conferencing to conduct meetings.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The resolution is adopted. Senator Gianaris.
There will be an immediate meeting of the Rules Committee in room 332.
There will be immediate meeting of the Rules Committee, room 332.
Senate stands at ease.
Senate will stand at ease. The Senate will return to order. Senator Gianaris.
There's a report of the Rules Committee at the desk. Please take that up.
Secretary will read.
Senator Stewart Cousins from the Committee on Rules reports the following bills. Senate Print 88 by Senator Gianaris, an act to amend the election law. Senate Print 324 by Senator Gianaris, an act to amend the election law. Senate Print 569 by Senator May, an act to amend the election law. Senate Print 735 by Senator Kavanaugh, an act to amend the private housing finance law. Senate Print 736 by Senator Claire, an act to amend the executive law. Senate Print 737 by Senator Claire, an act to amend the general business law. Senate Print 738 by Senator Claire, an act to amend the general business law. Senate Print 739 by Senator Ramos, an act to amend the labor law. Senate Print 740 by Senator Ramos, an act to amend the labor law. Senate Print 741 by Senator Webb, an act to amend the real property tax law. Senate Print 742 by Senator Adabo, an act to amend the insurance law. Senate Print 743 by Senator Gianaris, an act to amend the penal law. Senate Print 744 by Senator Holman Siegel, an act to amend the penal law. Senate Print 745 by Senator Myrie, an act to amend the general business law. Senate Print 746 by Senator Mayer, an act to amend the public health law. Senate Print 747 by Senator Scarcella-Stanton, an act to amend the education law. Senate Print 748 by Senator Gonardes, an act to amend the public health law. Senate Print 749 by Senator Bailey, an act to amend the executive law. Senate Print 750 by Senator Felder, an act to amend the social services law. Senate Print 751 by Senator Sepulveda, an act to amend the real property law. Senate Print 752 by Senator Holman Siegel, an act to amend the election law. Senate Print 753 by Senator Rivera, an act to amend the business law. Senate Print 754 by Senator Martinez, an act to amend the transportation law. Senate Print 755 by Senator Ramos, an act to amend the workers' compensation law. Senate Print 756 by Senator Holman Siegel, an act to amend the insurance law. Senate Print 757 by Senator Brooke, an act to amend the social services law. Senate Print 758 by Senator Prasad, an act to amend the public health law. Senate Print 759 by Senator Harkam, an act to amend the environmental conservation law. Senate Print 760 by Senator Rivera, an act to amend the insurance law. Senate Print 761 by Senator Ort, an act to amend the public health law. Senate Print 763 by Senator Kavanaugh, an act to amend the public health law. Senate Print 764 by Senator Harkam, an act to amend the correction law. Senate Print 765 by Senator Rivera, an act to amend the public health law. Senate Print 766 by Senator Parker, an act to amend the social services law. Senate Print 767 by Senator Comrie, an act to amend the banking law. Senate Print 768 by Senator Claire, an act to amend the correction law. Senate Print 769 by Senator Rivera, an act to amend a chapter of the law of 2024. Senate Print 770 by Senator Scarcella-Stanton, an act to amend the executive law. Senate Print 771 by Senator Mayer, an act to amend the insurance law. Senate Print 772 by Senator Claire, an act to amend the chapter of the laws of 2024. Senate Print 773 by Senator Kruger, an act to amend the environmental conservation law. Senate Print 774 by Senator Stavisky, an act to amend the insurance law. Senate Print 775 by Senator Skoufis, an act to amend the education law. Senate Print 776 by Senator Harkam, an act to amend the public health law. Senate Print 777 by Senator Fernandez, an act to amend the general business law. Senate Print 778 by Senator Skoufis, an act to amend the general business law. Senate Print 779 by Senator Comrie, an act to amend the executive law. Senate Print 780 by Senator Hinchy, an act to amend the agriculture and markets law. Senate Print 781 by Senator Palumbo, an act to amend the real property tax law. Senate Print 782 by Senator Palumbo, an act to amend the real property tax law. Senate Print 783 by Senator Skoufis, an act to amend the general municipal law. Senate Print 784 by Senator Prasad, an act to amend the social services law. Senate Print 785 by Senator Prasad, an act to amend the penal law. Senate Print 786 by Senator Rivera, an act to amend the public health law. Senate Print 787 by Senator Prasad, an act to amend the public authorities law. Senate Print 788 by Senator Rivera, an act to amend the public health law. Senate Print 789 by Senator Brisport, an act to amend the Family Court Act. Senate Print 790 by Senator Scarcella-Stanton, an act to amend the Veteran Services Law. Senate Print 791 by Senator Fernandez, an act to amend the Veteran Services Law. Senate Print 792 by Senator Ramos, an act to amend the Labor Law. Senate Print 793 by Senator Hinchy, an act to amend the Arts and Cultural Affairs Law. Senate Print 794 by Senator May, an act to amend the Agriculture and Markets Law. Senate Print 795 by Senator Hinchy, an act to amend the Agriculture and Markets Law. Senate Print 796 by Senator Claire, an act to amend the Elder Law. Senate Print 797 by Senator Gonardes, an act to amend the General Business Law. Senate Print 798 by Senator Ryan, an act to amend the Economic Development Law. Senate Print 799 by Senator Mayer, an act to amend the Election Law. Senate Print 800 by Senator Hinchy, an act to amend the Public Health Law. Senate Print 801 by Senator Krueger, an act to amend the Energy Law. Senate Print 802 by Senator Brooke, an act to amend the Public Health Law. Senate Print 803 by Senator Palumbo, an act to amend the chapter of the Law 2024. Senate Print 804 by Senator Comrie, an act to amend the General Business Law. Senate Print 805 by Senator Bailey, an act to amend the Executive Law. Senate Print 806 by Senator Rivera, an act to amend the Social Services Law. Senate Print 807 by Senator May, an act to amend a chapter of the Law 2024. Senate Print 808 by Senator Ramos, an act to amend the Labor Law. Senate Print 809 by Senator Prasad, an act to amend the Public Health Law. Senate Print 810 by Senator Myrie, an act to amend the Election Law. Senate Print 811 by Senator Janaris, an act to amend the Executive Law. Senate Print 812 by Senator Sanders, an act to amend the Banking Law. Senate Print 813 by Senator Webb, an act to amend the Public Health Law. Senate Print 814 by Senator Rivera, an act to amend the Public Health Law. Senate Print 815 by Senator Hoyman Siegel, an act to amend the Family Court Act. Senate Print 816 by Senator Hinchy, an act to amend the Tax Law. Senate Print 817 by Senator Hinchy, an act to amend the Tax Law. Senate Print 818 by Senator Hinchy, an act to amend the Cannabis Law. Senate Print 819 by Senator Hoyman Siegel, an act to amend the Family Court Act. Senate Print 820 by Senator Hinchy, an act to amend the Real Property Law and the Tax Law. Senate Print 821 by Senator Stewart Cousins, an act to amend the Real Property Tax Law. Senate Print 822 by Senator Gonzalez, an act to amend the State Technology Law. Senate Print 823 by Senator Hoyman Siegel, an act to amend the Labor Law. Senate Print 824 by Senator Krueger, an act to amend the Environmental Conservation Law. Senate Print 1030 by Senator Gonzalez, an act to amend the Election Law. Senate Print 1035 by Senator Myrie, an act to amend the Election Law. Senate Print 1036 by Senator Myrie, an act to amend the Election Law. Senate Print 1085 by Senator Stewart Cousins, an act to amend the Election Law. Senate Print 1087 by Senator Mayer, an act to amend the Election Law. Senate Print 1356 by Senator Skoufis, an act to amend the Election Law. All bills report direct to third reading.
Move to accept the report of the Rules Committee.
All in favor of accepting the report of the Rules Committee, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The Rules Committee report is accepted. Senator
Please take
Janaris.
up the supplemental calendar.
Secretary will read.
Calendar number 1, Senate Print 88 by Senator Gianaris, an act to amend the Election Law.
Lay it aside.
Calendar number 2, Senate Print 324 by Senator Gianaris, an act to amend the Election Law.
Lay it aside.
Calendar number 3, Senate Print 569 by Senator May, an act to amend the Election Law.
Lay it aside.
Calendar number 4, Senate Print 1030 by Senator Gonzalez, an act to amend the Election Law.
Read the last section.
Section 3, this act shall take effect on the 60th day after shall become a law.
Call the roll.
Adabo, Gianaris Krueger, Ort, Stewart Cousins, White.
Announce the results.
Ayes 61.
The bill's passed.
Calendar number 5, Senate Print 1035 by Senator Myrie, an act to amend the Election Law.
Read the last section.
Section 2, this act shall take effect on the 180th day after shall become a law.
Call the roll.
Adabo, Gianaris Krueger, Ort, Stewart Cousins, White.
Announce the results. Announce the results.
In relation to calendar 5, those senators voted in the negative are Senators Borrello, Wozik, and Weber. Ayes 58, nays 3.
Bill's passed.
Calendar number 6, Senate Print 1036 by Senator Myrie, an act to amend the Election Law.
Lay it aside.
Calendar number 7, Senate Print 1085 by Senator Stewart Cousins, an act to amend the Election Law.
Read the last section.
Section 5, this act shall take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, Gianaris Krueger, Ort, Stewart Cousins, White.
Announce the results.
Ayes 61.
Bill's passed.
Calendar number 8, Senate Print 1087 by Senator Mayer, an act to amend the Election Law.
Lay it aside.
Calendar number 9, Senate Print 1356 by Senator Skoufis, an act to amend the Election Law and the Vehicle and Traffic Law.
Lay it aside. Senator Janaris, that completes the reading of today's supplemental calendar.
Let's take up the controversial calendar, please.
Secretary, ring the bell. Secretary will read.
Calendar number 1, Senate Print 88 by Senator Gianaris, an act to amend the Election Law.
Senator Borrello, why do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Welcome back. Would the sponsor yield for a question?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes, I do.
The sponsor will yield.
Through you, Mr. President. So I'm curious, when you're deciding on which interactions with government that you're going to automatically register someone to vote, how did you choose the DMV, driver's licenses, and Medicaid?
Understanding is that those are the two agencies that would most readily have citizenship information available to them. And I know that you are very anxious not to register non-citizens, so we picked the ones that could do the best job of that.
Mr. President, the sponsor continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So they have citizenship information, but yet aren't non-citizens allowed to actually participate in both of those programs?
But the agencies will be responsible for ensuring that only the applicants that have confirmed and proven citizenship information will be transmitted to the Board of Elections.
Mr. President, will the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So if that's the case, then there's information that cannot be shared on citizenship with, like, the Board of Elections. So how's that going to translate to ensure that those folks are actually properly vetted, and if they do not remove themselves by opting out, they're actually are rightfully removed?
I'm not sure I understand your question. The agencies are entirely responsible for making sure that no information is transmitted to the Board of Elections unless the agency is in possession of citizenship information for that applicant.
Mr. President, sponsor continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So what resources have we given them to ensure that that happens? You know, we're talking about now tasking them with something they haven't done before. What resources are we giving them to ensure that they actually are doing that? And is there any, you know, I guess, repercussion if they don't do it?
Well, the effective date of this bill is 3 years into the future, and so I'm happy to talk with you in March of this year, and March of next year, and March of the year after that to support an increased budget for these agencies to implement this.
Mr. President, we'll see. Well, Mr. President, will sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
So you're saying that we've got time to figure it out, but we haven't actually outlined anything in this legislation that ensures that it happens.
Legislation provides for rulemaking authority at each of these agencies so that they will set up the proper structure that they need to implement this properly.
Mr. President, will sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So in the case of driver's license, 16 and 17-year-olds can get them. Are there anything in place to ensure that those folks are not registering to vote? Automatically
Those folks,
registered to vote?
As you probably know, those individuals can be pre-registered under current law. And so if someone presents at the DMV in that age group, they will be transmitted to the Board of Elections for pre-registration. But the DMV has their age data, just like it has their citizenship data, so they will be responsible for making sure that only the correct people are sent to the Board of Elections.
Mr. President, will sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
So I'm curious, we're looking at this as an opportunity to register everybody that interacts with them, but there are other agencies. Would there be a problem with someone who's, you know, getting a pistol permit or a hunting license or a fishing license? Why wouldn't we automatically register those folks to vote?
We're not trying to register everyone that interacts with the agencies. We're trying to register everyone who is an eligible voter that interacts with these agencies. And to your question, those other agencies do not have citizenship data as readily available as the two in this legislation would have.
Mr. President, sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So, but isn't it true, though, that ultimately it falls onto the Board of Elections at the local level to ensure that this is, that these folks are properly being opted out?
I believe the way the bill works is it routes the data through the state board and then down to the relevant county.
Mr. President, sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So the first point of contact, we're going at the local level for the DMV or for Medicaid benefits. Then we're going to go to the state committee and then back to the local committee. And we're expecting all of that information on citizenship to follow and to ensure that those folks are properly opted out.
Well, I mean, the information doesn't have to follow. At the first point of transmission to the state board, anyone that's transmitted is a citizen, and the DMV knows that. And so at that point, nothing needs to follow them. They are the only people that are, whose information is being sent to the state board are citizens.
Mr. President, will sponsor continue to
Will
yield?
the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
So at this point, I think we're saying that we've gotten all these extra days of voting. We've got people that can register very easily. They can register. We can request online. So why do we really need this? At what point are we saying that we absolutely have to do this and put, I guess, the security of our elections at risk? What's the need?
First of all, you're welcome because we did all those things over your objection. But second of all the things you mentioned make it easier for people to vote who are registered to vote. There are up to 2 million people in our state who are eligible voters, who are not yet registered. And so this is an effort to increase the voter rolls and make allow more people to vote who actually are eligible to vote.
Mr. President, sponsor continue to
Will
yield.
the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
We're not allowing them to vote, we're compelling them to register. I think that's an important difference. If someone chooses not to do so, we're compelling to do so. Where else do we compel someone to register for something?
That's an absurd characterization. You put an obstacle in someone's path and then say if you remove the obstacle, you're compelling them to take the step to jump over the hurdle that you put in their place. Why do people need to register at all? If we know that they're eligible to vote, why are you going to make someone jump through a hoop to actually cast their vote? Who are you to tell them they have to jump through several hurdles in order to exercise their constitutional right to vote, the most important right they have?
Mr. President, sponsor continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So following that logic, then, why should we compel someone to register to own a gun? You're just saying it's a constitutional right. What obstacle did we put in place? They have the ability to go out and register. What is the obstacle we put in their place?
Well, obviously, there's an administrative obstacle you are putting in someone's place when they have to go to a board of elections or fill out a form or what have you, that if they wake up on one election day and they're an eligible voter and they meet all the criteria of voting and they haven't taken the time to do that and they want to go vote, they should be allowed to do that.
Mr. President, sponsor continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yield.
Well, again, so there's an administrative obstacle to exercising your Second Amendment right. Does that same logic follow?
No, because guns are inherently more dangerous than filling out a piece of paper with your preference on who you want to represent you.
Mr. President, sponsor continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Yes, I
Sponsor
didn't know there
yields.
was a dangerous standard to exercising your constitutional rights. But with that being said, I don't understand an obstacle, an administrative obstacle. We do a lot of things that we make sure people have to be registered for, like drive a car. There's an administrative obstacle to driving a car. Should we remove that administrative obstacle? Should we be able to wake up one morning and decide today's the day I'm going to drive and just go do it?
Because in order to drive, you need to be trained and tested in the fact that you can operate a 2-ton vehicle. Okay, and there's certain things we need to do for everyone's protection to make sure you can exercise that right responsibly. We don't have that for voting. People who are adult age, are citizens of this country, are eligible to vote. We've, thank God, moved away from the world where we test people before they can vote, or we put up all sorts of barriers to their vote. Maybe you want to go back to that, Senator Burrell. I certainly don't. But for all the other examples you're mentioning, these are things that we need to make sure people can exercise those rights responsibly. And so, yes, you have to jump through some hurdles to own a gun. You have to jump through some hurdles to drive a car. Because if you don't know how to do that correctly, you're going to kill people.
Mr. President, on the bill.
Senator Borrello on the bill.
Thank you, Senator Gianaris. First debate of the year is always the most fun. So, you know, it's interesting that we heard a lot recently in this election from the people of New York State. We heard a lot about what was really concerning them: affordability, crime, this rampant, out-of-control migrant crisis. So we're coming back here with no solutions for them, no answers. So instead, we're going to create a crisis that doesn't exist: access to being able to vote. I have yet to see a voter that's been disenfranchised say, I tried to vote, I wanted to vote, I couldn't vote. Haven't presented that person yet to us. But yet, here we are, manufacturing a whole host of crises when it comes to voting in elections to solve today. Now, most of these bills, all these bills, we've seen before. So we've yet to actually address the real reasons that New Yorkers sent us back to Albany. Affordability, rampant crime, the fact that people don't feel safe, the fact that most New Yorkers believe this state is headed in the wrong direction and doesn't believe that this body has done anything about it. So today, we're going to tell people that, guess what? Even if you don't want to register to vote, we're going to register you to vote. That's that important to us. We're going to compel you to be registered to vote. And then we're going to say, oh, you know what, don't worry. It'll get figured out. The agencies that are involved, the bureaucracy, they'll make sure those folks are citizens. We don't know that for sure. The bottom line is the most important thing is not that everybody votes. The most important thing is that people believe that our elections are secure, that their vote is counted, and that our elections are fair. And this undermines that, undermines people's confidence that our elections are fair and secure. That is the foundation of our democracy, and that's why this is a bad idea. So I will continue to vote no on this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Borrello. Are there any other senators wishing to be heard? Senator Martins, why do you rise?
If the sponsor would yield for a question?
Will the sponsor
Or a
yield?
couple of questions?
Yes.
Thank
Sponsor
you.
yields.
So, Senator, could you tell us how we will know that the Department of Motor Vehicles or, Medicaid, what processes they have in place to ensure that only the information that they are transmitting to the Board of Elections includes citizens?
They are in possession of this information, and they will set up a structure and rules to make sure that people who are not eligible won't get passed along. But if I may ask you a question as well, Senator Martins, what protections do we have in place to make sure a non-citizen doesn't walk into the Board of Elections today and fill out a form and register to vote?
President, through you, I'm not aware of any, Senator.
Exactly.
And so I am skeptical, Mr. President, through you, if I can continue to, if the sponsor
Senator Gianaris
continue
continues to yield. Senator Gianaris continues to yield.
So that's exactly the point, and I think we shouldn't question that. We should actually highlight that point. So my question is there a process in place where we, as we're being asked to vote today, know that the Department of Motor Vehicles can verify the information that they have to ensure that they are U.S. citizens? For example, if you'll forgive me, I'll ask a two-part question. Will they be cooperating with the federal government in terms of accessing records to determine whether or not these individuals are in fact citizens?
Motor vehicles, we already entrust to handle and process this information. If someone goes in to get a real ID or the type of driver's license that only citizens can have, we trust the DMV to receive that information from the applicant and to process it accordingly. Now that has to do with whether someone can get on a certain domestic flight, for example. You can't get on a plane at some point later this year without a particular type of driver's license from the DMV, which they receive this information, process it accordingly, and give out the ID. So we trust them to do that. But somehow you don't want to trust them to do the same thing for registering people to vote when this is tighter than anything in our existing system. Because right now, anybody can walk into the Board of Elections and on their word, register to vote. Board doesn't ask for citizenship data. Okay, the DMV actually has that data. And so you have some assurance that the administrative employee who's dealing with this at least knows this person is eligible to vote.
Mr. President, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Excuse me? Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
Thank you. And Senator, just for the sake of clarity in the record, is it your position as the sponsor that the default from either one of these agencies or any of these agencies, if they can't definitively determine that the person is a U.S. citizen, will be that they will not refer that person to the Board of Elections? Is that your sense as the sponsor of this bill?
Explicitly in the legislation.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Martins. Are there any other senators wishing to be heard? Seeing and hearing none, debate is closed. Secretary will ring the bell. Read the last section.
Section 7, this act will take effect January 1st, 2028.
Call the roll.
Addabbo, Gianaris Kruger, Ort, Sewell Cousins, White.
Announce the result.
In relation to calendar number 1, those senators voted in the negative are Senators Ashby, Borrello, Kazari Fitzpatrick, Chan, Gallivan, Griffo, Helming, Lanza, Matera, Murray, Oberacker, O'Mara, Ort, Palumbo, Rhodes, Rollison, Steck, Tedisco, Walzick, Weber, and White. Ayes 40, nays 21.
Bills passed.
Calendar number 2, Senate Print 324 by Senator Gianaris, an act to amend the election law.
Senator Martins, why do you rise?
Mr. President, if the sponsor would yield for a few questions?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes, I would.
The sponsor yields.
Thank you, Senator. The bill uses the word knowingly in terms of implying or applying liability on a campaign, elected official, committee, if they knowingly solicit, accept, or receive contributions. What does that mean to you, that word knowingly? Do they actually have to know, or should they know? What's that standard to you?
I think that's the standard usage of the word that we see in so many of our laws, where someone needs to have the intent to commit the crime they're accused of.
Okay, Mr. President, through you, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So if there's a donation from a corporation that has an owner with more than 1%, and they make a contribution to a candidate, and the candidate accepts it and does not know that that corporation does not have more than 1% of its ownership in a foreign person, then there would be no liability. Is that the point?
No liability on the recipient of the contribution. There would be liability on the part of the contributor because they, of course, would know how much of their company is owned by a foreign entity or not. And there's a requirement for an attestation by the contributor that they would sign saying, my entity does not have more than 1% foreign ownership.
Mr. President, through you, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So on the issue of that attestation, there is a requirement that it be signed by, I believe, the president or CEO of the company on behalf of the company to certify that it does not infringe on the particulars of your bill. If that attestation is not filed, on whom is the liability placed?
I think it would be a permissible contribution if the attestation is missing.
Mr. President, through you, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
And if it's not a permissible contribution, does that impose liability on the recipient of that for not having received the certification?
Suppose that would be something that the Board of Elections enforcement team can indicate to the way they even do now. If you're missing particular data point about, say, attribution of contributions from a partnership, which we're required to do now. And if you don't do that, the Board of Elections flags it and says, either come up with the answer or give the contribution back. I would suspect that's how it would be handled.
Mr. President, through you, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So the alternative would be, if I understand correctly, that the Board of Elections would flag it and the individual would be asked to either show the certification or return the funds. Mr. President, through you, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Under this bill, we use the word foreigner. Does that include a resident alien here in the United States?
No, it does not.
Mr. President, through you, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So if there's a company that's owned by U.S. citizens or resident aliens, and 1% of that company happens to be owned by someone outside the country, whomever it happens to be, but 99% of the company is owned by people who live here, either as citizens or resident aliens, that company under this bill would not be able to make a contribution either to a local race, village, town, county, or to state races if this bill were to pass.
Now, those 99% people can contribute individually, nothing's stopping them from doing that, but not under the corporate entity.
Mr. President, through you, if the sponsor will continue to yield.
Sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
I think you'd agree with me that a corporation has always been considered a person or an entity unto itself, and so has certain rights with regard to First Amendment and the ability to actually express their First Amendment rights when it comes to things like supporting certain candidates. So are you saying that that corporation, if they have 1% of the corporation be owned by outside entities or a foreigner, would no longer have that right to express itself?
Well, first of all, I don't agree that it was always the case that corporations were considered persons. It was the case since the Citizens United decision, which was one of the more horrible decisions the Supreme Court has made. But be that as it may, yes, what I am suggesting to you is that a corporation that is 1% or more under the influence of a foreign entity should not be involved in our political process. Now, mind you, there's already a ban on foreign entities spending on political campaigns in the United States. A big loophole is that a foreign entity can do so in a corporate name if it has significant influence over the corporation. That's what we're trying to close here.
Mr. President, through you, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
And is it then your position that a 1% ownership in a corporation or an entity is enough of an influence over that entity where it should prevent the entity from actually contributing? Is the 1% is enough to sway you that it would unduly influence an election? Is that it?
Yes. Do you know how much 1% of Amazon, for example, is worth? It's a lot of money.
And through you, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So let's not talk about Amazon. I know there's a history with you, Senator Gianaris, and Amazon. So we can talk about other entities.
I'd like us to remain germane to the concept of the bill,
apologize,
Senator
Mr.
Martins.
President.
Thank you.
Let's talk about our more common corporations in our state, what we commonly refer to mom and pop shops in our communities. For whatever it happens to be, they can be, a local deli, it could be a bodega, it could be a construction company. But are you suggesting that 1% has enough influence in those local entities that would have an interest, for example, in supporting different candidates in their community, that's enough of a concern for you that you would put this prohibition?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. President, through you, if the sponsor would yield for just one more question.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
If the sponsor would relay, for example, if you're aware of any instance in which 1% of a company certainly can exert some control over the company, whether it's board of directors or any of its voting authority or direction of the company, in the normal course of business where 1% becomes a threshold that would be, frankly, viable in New York State for control, or any other circumstance or example that you can show where 1% made a difference?
You're thinking of an example where maybe the entity doesn't want to do something and the 1% would not be able to overrule them. But imagine a scenario where you're a company, there's a part owner of your company, so I imagine you want to stay on good terms with the investors and owners in your company, and that person says, hey, I know I'm from whatever country, but I'm trying to exert influence over this elected official. Could you make a contribution? Because I can't do it. Can you make a contribution in our company's name to this individual for me? Assuming it's permitted, which it is currently, why would the owner say no? So yes, I think a 1% investor would have that level of influence over the company's owner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator. On the bill.
Senator Martins on the bill.
The idea that someone's going to ask someone else to make a contribution on that person's behalf when they know that they cannot make that contribution can be a reality, even today. Even today, someone can, and if they are, and if they do, they should be held accountable for that. The idea that we take a lawfully created entity where the vast majority of the entity, 99% of that entity, is U.S. citizens or U.S. resident aliens, people who work hard in their local communities, and regardless of the circumstance, somebody happens to have an ownership interest who is a foreigner. Now, I'll give you an example. When you come in, you get your resident alien card as a process eventually to becoming a citizen. Not everyone, Mr. President, becomes a citizen of the United States. They choose to keep their resident alien card, and often they go back to their country of origin or they leave the United States, and therefore they lose their resident alien status and they become a foreigner. So while they're here in this country as a resident alien, they are here, they have strong roots in the community, they may have passed on their company or their corporation or whatever the entity is to their family and to their children, and they go back and they keep a piece for themselves. But by keeping a piece for themselves, that corporation or that entity can no longer make a contribution. And I have to question why, under these circumstances, are we handcuffing entire sections or groups of entities that would otherwise have a valid cause to be involved? Our corporations, our partnerships, our LLCs are extensions of our communities and our business leaders. That's how they choose to do business. Now, we can turn around and decide we do not want any more contributions from any corporations, any LLCs, or anything other than a resident alien or a citizen, someone who's here. Get rid of all these corporations and get beyond this. But that's not what the sponsor is asking us to do. We're creating a fiction, and we're creating a fiction at the expense, Mr. President, of every candidate for elected office in this state, be they a local mayor, be they a supervisor, council member, member of a county, or whether it's us here in the county, in the state legislature. Because I'm not so sure about what knowingly means when there's a provision there that says that you can get an attestation and you have a responsibility to get an attestation in order to show and prove that that company doesn't have 1% of its ownership by a foreign national. So maybe all of us, when we get a donation, if we can, need to return it or go get that attestation. But remember, folks, it's an e-felony. The fine is $10,000 plus return of the contribution, personally. I think we reach certain levels, Mr. President, where we should speak plainly, and if it's the sponsor's intention to remove corporations from the political process, then that's the bill that we should be debating here on the floor today, and not hide it under some pretense of percentages that put an undue burden not only on each and every one of the candidates in our state, but on the corporations and entities themselves. I'll be voting no.
Thank you, Senator Martins. Are there any other senators wishing to be heard? Seeing and hearing none, debate is closed. Secretary will ring the bell. Read the last section.
Section 6 is action to take effect on the 180th day after shall become a law.
Call the roll.
Addabbo, Giannaris Kruger, Ort, Sewell Cousins, White.
Announce the results.
In relation to Calendar 2, those senators voted in the negative are Senators Borrello, Kazari Fitzpatrick, Chan, Gallivan, Helming, Martins, Terra, Oberacker, O'Mara, Ort, Rhodes, Steck, Tedisco, Wozik, Weber, and White. Ayes 45, nays 16.
The bill is passed.
Calendar number 3, Senate Print 569 by Senator May, enactment of the election law.
Senator Wozik, welcome back. Why do you rise?
I'm hoping Senator May will yield for some questions.
Will the sponsor yield?
I will.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President. In addition to no excuse absentee, 2 weeks of early voting, why do we need consolidated voting centers on Election Day when all of the community polling locations are already open for the community members where they live?
Thank you, through you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator, and welcome back. So this is about Election Day voting. It's about using the polling books that we have, the electronic poll books that we have, that allow for flexibility any voter can show up at a site during early voting, and if they live in the county, they can have the appropriate ballot printed out for them for their address so that they can vote for the candidates that they're eligible to vote for. This extends this to election day, when vote centers can be created where anyone in the county or anyone in a municipality can show up, and they don't have to go to the assigned polling place that they have traditionally gone to. The reason why this is helpful is that it creates an additional option, but it also allows for some consolidation. So we found in Cayuga County, which I represent, they have been trying this out. They put a polling place at a mall that was centrally located, and over the course of the election, 20% of all the ballots cast in Cayuga County were cast at that location. Over time, it should enable them to consolidate some of the other polling places. I will say in Indiana, where more than half of the counties use a vote center model. I have a quote from the Indiana Secretary of State saying, "Vote centers add convenience for voters, save counties money, and can increase voter turnout." So those are the key reasons why I am excited that this bill is on the agenda today.
Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor would continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
I will.
The sponsor yields.
If Cayuga County already has this in practice, why do we require legislation statewide to do it here today?
It's possible to do this now, but many counties have been reluctant to try because it wasn't specifically in the law, and it required a dispensation from the Board of Elections. This puts it in the law so that the commissioners from all the counties will know that this is an option that is available to them.
The sponsor would continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
I will.
The sponsor yields.
Did the Cayuga County Legislature pass a resolution supporting their Board of Elections having a vote center on Election Day?
I believe so, yes, both 2 years ago and this year.
Through you, Mr. President, would the sponsor continue to
Will
yield?
the sponsor yield?
I will.
The
Has
sponsor
the
yields.
New York State Association of Counties requested this legislation?
I'm aware of. Through you, Mr.
Through you, Mr. President, would the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
I will.
The sponsor yields.
In addition to Cayuga County already having this in practice, have you received resolutions from any other county in the state of New York of our 62 requesting this legislation?
Mr. President, I am not aware of that, but I believe there is one other location in the state that has specifically wanted to do this.
Sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor
Would you be
yields.
willing to share the other location with this body?
Mr. President, I would if I knew what it was, but I don't have it on the top of my tongue.
Through you, Mr. President, would the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
I will.
The sponsor yields.
Since Cayuga County requested this of their Board of Elections and already has it in practice, does this legislation also require a validation by county legislatures before their Board of Elections would seek a new way to do elections on Election Day with voting centers?
Through you, Mr. President, no, this would allow the County Board of Elections to make this decision.
Through you, Mr. President, would the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
I will.
Sponsor yields.
So if Cayuga County in their experiment, if their legislature decides that this wasn't going the way that they wanted it to, or it was more expensive or more confusing for their Board of Elections, but their Board of Elections has decided to carry forward with this proposal, if your bill is enacted, could Cayuga County continue to do so without the approval of their legislature?
President, I am not certain of the answer to that question. I do know that boards of elections, county boards of elections, have to go through the state board of elections and get permission there. So there is a process.
Mr. President, will the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
I will.
The sponsor yields.
When we're talking about the locations for where you mentioned a shopping mall, when we're talking about the locations, what will the State Board of Elections require of counties that are applying for this?
The bill, through you, Mr. President, the bill says the State Board of Elections shall promulgate rules and regulations establishing the approval process. So that is for the State Board of Elections to decide.
To continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
I will.
The sponsor yields.
What is the State Board of Elections approval requirements? Are we handing any of them down through here, or is it just between County and Local Board of Elections and the State of New York State Board to figure out without the input of this body?
Through you, Mr. President, this is left up to the discretion of the State Board of Elections.
The sponsor continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
I will.
The sponsor yields.
So I know that most county board of elections are set up, well, we've had early voting for a while now in New York State, so they're set up with these consolidated voting sites already. We've got laws on the books, and they do this. You're carrying this over to election day. Most of my experience is that, and we've got some specific rules about where those sites are going to be placed in the county. The County Board of Elections have already resourced for those locations. They require either a printer ready to go to produce ballots in order for people from any electoral district in the county to vote appropriately with who's on their ballot, or they would require, and in early voting it's easy to resource these things because the Board of Elections already has access to all of the ballots across the county. They haven't yet dispersed them out to their electoral districts. How in County Board of Elections, and maybe you could tell us in Cayuga County, did they have to order extra ballots to have on site at their voting center, or do they have a printer on site? And if you'd share what the cost of that printer might be for a county.
Through you, Mr. President, my understanding is that they had a printer, and I do not know the cost of that, but I do know that as this kind of model can allow for consolidation of polling places, that will save money to counties. I will also say that I have voted for years at a polling site that is already consolidated in the sense that there are several election districts vote at that same site. And printing of the ballots with using an electronic poll book and printing the ballots has immensely sped up the process of being able to vote at that site. So this is also something that I think could bring benefits to the voters in terms of the speed and convenience of casting their ballot.
We continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
I will.
The sponsor yields.
I've always enjoyed voting at my local one, and I like to when I can. I don't know, last year I didn't have the opportunity to vote. I voted absentee last year, but I love to get in there and see the faces. You get to know the poll workers pretty well. And that adds an extra layer of security. They know your face, they know your name, they expect you back every election. We also have poll watchers and some rules about poll watchers in the state of New York. When you're consolidating everyone in a county onto one voting center on election day, that I imagine would be pretty busy, how does the oversight in poll watching work in a scenario like that?
Mr. President, we're not talking about consolidating everyone into one polling site, but we are allowing anyone in the county to go to this one polling site and cast their ballot at that site, which, if you've forgotten where your polling site is, I know one of the issues that local boards of elections have been contending with is a lot of the traditional sites where people have voted in the past, like schools, it's become much more difficult to secure those locations. And so, at least in Syracuse, I'm aware that my polling location now has changed every year or two for quite a few years. And so it's confusing to the voters. They don't always know for sure where their polling site is. But if they know there is a location in the county or in the municipality where anyone in that municipality can vote, then they, whatever uncertainty they might have about where to vote is resolved for them. That it makes it easier for them.
To continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Very well.
The sponsor yields.
So could somebody perceivably vote twice if the system isn't communicating? I know that the elections don't stop. If you're out in an electoral district in your local community, their computer goes down for whatever reason, they have backup so that they can continue to count votes. Could someone perceivably vote in a consolidated voting center that you're proposing here in this bill and then vote in their local polling place as well?
Through you, Mr. President, no, because the electronic poll books prevent that.
President, would the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
I will.
The sponsor yields.
How did you come up with the 90 days to apply to the State Board of Elections in order to have a completely new polling site available in the county?
Through you, Mr. President, that was a length of time that gives the Board of Elections time to assess the plan.
Will the sponsor continue to yield?
I will.
The sponsor yields.
Was that feedback from State Board of Elections or from local Board of Elections?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Through you, Mr. President, would the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
I will.
The sponsor yields.
Have and the elections commissioners, I believe, are actually going to be here this week. Has the Election Commissioners Association explained how this might delay accurate electoral district counting on election night?
President, I believe they are supportive of this, and there is no expectation that this would delay counting of ballots.
Mr. President, would the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
I would.
The sponsor yields.
Why would a county be, and I know you said consolidation of polling places a couple of times, why would a county be motivated to shift time and resources from their community polling sites onto a voting center?
President, I'll take my answer away from the county level and talk about the city of Auburn, which is also in my district, which has gone to, I believe, 4 voting sites on election day. And it has proven to be very popular, and it has not hurt turnout in any way, but it has saved money and created much more clarity for the voters. And I'm sure there are some voters who miss their traditional neighborhood polling place, but it is working really well, and it's taking the technology that we now have that is allowing for this to happen and really using it in the best and most efficient way you could use it.
Will the sponsor yield?
Well,
The sponsor yields.
Is the city of Auburn pretty balanced in its demographics, Republican and Democrat enrollees?
through you, Mr. President, the city of Auburn is somewhat on the Democratic side, but the county is a very red county.
Mr. President, on the bill.
Senator Walczyk on the bill.
Well, I don't have much more to say than the sponsor has already said about this. It's to favor Democratic voting areas and to consolidate polling places. That's what this bill is for. It's not to make it easier to vote. You already have polling places on election day in your community. This is about creating an additional polling place in an urbanized area and pushing as many people towards it as you can. She admitted by her own example that this bill will favor a Democratic area in a Republican county. consolidation of polling places. The sponsor said it out loud. This is not about making it easier to vote. It's about consolidating polling sites from rural to urban sites and advantaging people who live and work in cities over people men and women and blue-collar women who live in cities and work in rural areas. So with that, I will be voting no, and I urge my colleagues to do the same.
Thank you, Senator Walczak. Are there any other senators wishing to be heard? Seeing and hearing none, debate is closed. Secretary, ring the bell. So, read the last section.
Section 2, this act will take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Addabbo, Gianaris Kruger, Ort, Stoll-Cousins, White.
Senator May to explain her vote.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Walczak, for the debate, but not for putting words in my mouth. The state of Indiana, famous extreme left-wing state, the state of Utah also, and many other states, both red and blue, use vote centers and have used them for a long time as a way to make voting, as I said, as the Indiana Secretary of State says, to add convenience for voters, save counties money, and increase voter turnout. This is not about privileging one party over another, and certainly not in Cayuga County, which is a heavily Republican county, and the legislature, under Republican leadership as well as under Democratic leadership, has endorsed vote centers there. So to put words in my mouth and suggest that this is somehow a partisan ploy to make it only possible for Democrats to vote is really insulting. I have to say vote centers are efficient and they are smart. And that's the reason why I am excited to vote yes on this bill, and I urge my colleagues to do so. Thank you.
Senator May to be recorded in the affirmative. Announce the results.
In relation to calendar 3, those senators voted in the negative are Senators Ashby, Kazari Fitzpatrick, Gallivan, Griffo, Patera, Murray, Oberacker, Ort, Rhodes, Steck, Walczak, and White. Also, Senators Tedisco, Chan, and O'Mara. Ayes. Also, Senator Martins. Ayes 45, nays 16.
Bill is passed.
Calendar number 6, Senate Print 1036 by Senator Myrie, enactment of the election law.
Senator Murray, why do you rise?
President, would the sponsor yield for a few questions?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
Thank you, Senator. Through you, Mr. President. Let's start with the basic question, and that is, why is there a need for this bill, and how will it change the current law?
Through you, Mr. President, this bill codifies a couple of court cases, both from the New York State Court of Appeals and from some of our appellate courts, to clarify in the law that a voter's intent and their connection to the home is what determines their voter registration. What we have seen in some election litigation is the challenging of residencies despite the case law supporting this, and this bill is an attempt to put it in statute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
Thank you. So the purpose on the bill, it says, this bill provides that a voter may register to vote at any residence to which the voter maintains a continuous connection with an intent to return. So I'd like to start with the first part, the continuous connection. What does continuous connection mean? What qualifies as a continuous connection?
Through you, Mr. President, in Wilkie versus Board of Elections, this is from the 3rd Department, the court said that at minimum, weekend and country homes established a continuous connection. The Court of Appeals has said that the crucial determination for election residency purposes is that the individual must manifest an intent coupled with physical presence. And the courts have interpreted that to, at minimum, meet a requirement that someone be present at least for 2 days of the week via a weekend home.
President, will the sponsor continue to
Will
yield?
the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
So it sounds like, and I'm not here to interpret what the court was saying myself, but it sounds like what they're saying is a 2-day stay would take the place of a 5-day stay or week-long stay. So they're basically saying that a part-time would supersede your full-time residence where you live. Would that be accurate?
You, Mr. President, I don't think that's accurate. I think what the court meant to underscore was that it is the voter's intent. So if it's the voter's intent that they be registered to vote at a place where they only spend 2 days a week, the court will uplift that intent over where they may be staying on other days of the week.
President, will the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Thank you. So if I could get a little scenario here and give it to you, I'd like your take on this particular scenario. So you have someone that resides in, say, Nassau County. Their kids go to school in Nassau County. Their spouse is on the school board in Nassau County. They're a volunteer firefighter in Nassau County, but they own a vacation home out in the Hamptons, out in Suffolk County. Despite the fact that they have so much continuous connection right there, they could actually ask that the Suffolk County, where they own a home, but they don't actually live, that could then be where they will vote. Would that be accurate?
Mr. President, if that is their intent, that's correct.
Through you, Mr. President, will the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So in that scenario, they change their voting and they say, I want to vote in Suffolk County instead of Nassau, despite the fact that my spouse is on the school board. Now, the school board elections earlier in the year, would it be possible for this person to vote in the school board election for their spouse in Nassau County, change their residency through this bill, and in the general election in November, vote at their Hamptons home in Nassau or Suffolk County in a completely different election? Would that be possible under this law?
Through you, Mr. President, I'm not sure I'm following the entirety of that hypothetical, but if they are meeting every election law requirement for voter registration, and it is their intent to mark the Suffolk County residents as where they would like to be registered, then that, according to the case law and when this bill becomes law, would be permissible.
President, would the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
So I'll kind of reaffirm that scenario through the election law. So election law, we'll take this past year, 2024. In 2024, we had quite a few different elections at different times of the year. Most village elections are in March. The presidential primary was in April. School district, budget, and board member elections were in May. Congressional state primary elections were in June. And then the general election in November. And then, of course, after that, we have our fire commissioners and their budget in December. So following the scenario I just gave you, if I'm understanding you correctly, if we pass this bill, it's signed into law, someone can vote in the village or even a school district budget and board election in, say, in May. If they meet the deadline, which according to what I got from the Board of Elections, for the general election on November 5th, their change of address would have to be done on October 21st and voter registration deadline October 26th. So they could likely make that change, vote in the school board for their spouse, vote in the other local elections in Nassau County, but as long as they meet that deadline, they can now switch and vote in elections completely outside of where they voted in every other election that year. Is that correct?
President, first, I appreciate the hypothetical on how many elections there are. This conference has supported the consolidation of those in even years that caused a lot of consternation last session. But that aside, yes, if they have met the requirements and it is their intent to be registered and consider the Suffolk County or Nassau County as their primary residence, that would be permissible.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the bill, please.
Senator Murray on the bill.
And thank you, Senator Myrie. So actually, that wasn't really much of a hypothetical because if I remember correctly, all over social media last year, you saw a lot of people that lived in the city that were urging their friends, change your registration Go to the Hudson Valley where there were close races. Go out to Suffolk County where there, according to them, there was a close Senate race in the 1st Senate District, but my good friend Senator Palumbo made that not so close. But they were trying to urge everyone to go where there were competitive races. I got to tell you, this just feels bad. You know, we live in a country where we have this privilege to elect our local leaders. We have a representative government. And what that means is we're voting for the people that represent us, but not just us. They're representing our families, our neighbors, our communities, where we live. They will be making decisions, or I should say we are making decisions that will directly affect their life. But through this bill, we're making a mockery of that. We're saying do the ones that work for you until maybe you don't have a competitive race in the state Senate race. So let's jump out and go somewhere else. If you're, by the way, lucky enough to own a second home. You know, I think everyone here has acknowledged we're in the middle of a housing crisis. It's pretty expensive. Nobody can afford to buy a home. Nobody can afford to live in New York, except who? The wealthy. I do find it ironic that for years, all my years in government, it was that side of the aisle blaming this side of the aisle for looking out for the wealthy. You only give tax breaks to the wealthy. You only pass this to benefit the wealthy. Well, let me tell you something. The poor, the working class, they are not benefiting from this bill. They don't have multiple homes all across the state where they can pick and choose, where they take advantage of the very privilege we have of voting for who will represent them. The wealthy do. That alone should be a reason. The fact that we're leaving out most people, not letting them participate in this, that alone should be a reason for voting no. But I'm voting no because, as I said, this stinks. This isn't what our elections are about. So for many reasons, but especially that, it's making a mockery of our voting rights. I'll be voting no. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Murray. Are there any other senators wishing to be heard? Senator Martins, why do you rise?
President, if the sponsor would yield for a couple of questions?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
Thank you, Senator Myrie. Under this bill, Senator, would a person be able to register in more than one place, register to vote in more than one place in New York State?
Through you, Mr. President, no, that is currently against the law. This bill does not touch that.
Through you, Mr. President, if the sponsor would yield for another question.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Through this bill, if someone registers to vote in one community for one election, can they then change their registration to another home to allow them to vote in another community for the following election, and so on?
Through you, Mr. President, the current law prevents double registration. You can only be registered to one residence at a time. And this bill would not impact that.
Mr. President, through you, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So just taking on some of the examples that were given earlier, if someone does have a home in one location, they can vote there. Clearly, they can register, their family is there, they live there. But if they happen to have a second home somewhere else, they can register there, frankly, eliminate their first registration and register in that second place for that election as long as they have a nexus to that location. Isn't that correct?
Through you, Mr. President, it's not just nexus, that's a legal turn of phrase. It is, according to the courts, an intent to return and remain and a physical presence.
Mr. President, through you, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So if they have that intent, Senator, and then they exercise that vote in that other location, would this bill then allow them to have a separate intent and return to the original location and register to vote again if they do, in fact, meet the requirements and demonstrate that subjective intent?
Through you, Mr. President, if I'm understanding the question correctly, the voter is allowed to change their intent. They cannot hold multiple registrations at multiple residencies. It has to be one at a time, but they are allowed. to register at different residencies if that is what they intend to do.
Mr. President, through you, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
And Senator, if you could just elaborate on how that intent would be demonstrated.
Through you, Mr. President, the courts have said that the crucial determination is the purpose of the individual must manifest an intent coupled with a physical presence. And in the Court of Appeals case, it also mentions that it has to be significant and continuing attachments to that residence. I'll also point out, because my colleague, Senator Murray, communicated that this was a bill with the intention to only benefit affluent New Yorkers, but the bill says in line 6 that it includes college students, giving them the ability to have their college residences count for voter registration. We're very proud of our higher education institutions that welcome people of all incomes, young people of all backgrounds, and for a long time, litigation has forced these college students out of those voter registrations. Their ballots have been challenged, and this is one way for us to communicate that we do support our young people engaging in their democracy.
Mr. President, through you, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So under this bill, Senator, a college student who is in a university college setting for a few months would be able to register there and have an impact on a local mayoral election for a village or town council race or supervisor race, even though their only connection to that community is through that institution of higher learning and they don't have any roots there, thereby, well, first of all, is that correct?
Mr. President, I would disagree with the premise that college students don't have roots in the place that they go to college. But yes, they are allowed to register and use that as their voter registration residency.
Mr. President, on the bill. Thank you,
Senator
Senator.
Martin's on the bill.
Where do I start? Look, we all know what the problems are with this bill. Voting for local elections are critically important. And it's an obligation, you know, as a former mayor of a village and those of us who have served on a local level in the past, we understand what it's like to grow up in a community, care for the community, understand who your neighbors are, and protect that community. The idea that we would allow for thousands of individuals who come in for a couple of months at a time and somehow say that they have the same care, concern for that community as the people who live there every day, raise their family there every day, protect the schools, pay for the streets, is lost on me. Frankly, it really is. I understand how important it is for local communities to have an identity and make those decisions for themselves. But I would ask everyone in the chamber to understand what it is that we are doing and will be doing to our local communities and how it will impact decisions in those communities going forward. Everyone has a right to an opinion. We all know that. You exercise that right by voting where you live. And with all due respect, where you live is not where you happen to live in a dorm for a couple of months. It's where you grow up, it's where you have your roots, it's where you raise your family, and it's where you make a difference in your communities. In addition, this idea, based on a Court of Appeals decision and an interpretation of a Court of Appeals decision, that I can take a resident, say, of the village of Westbury, who could vote in that local election and then leave, go out east, or go upstate and vote in another local election there because they happen to have a house there, and impact elections along the way based on their subjective intent, regardless of the criteria. Folks, we're turning this on its head. This isn't what this is supposed to be. And the idea that we're going to allow people to manipulate this system beyond its core. Local people voting in local elections for people they trust and the leadership that they want. Frankly, I think it's wrong. Mr. President, I'll be voting no.
Thank you, Senator Martins. Are there any other senators wishing to be heard? Seeing and hearing none, debate is. Senator Disco, are you going to explain your vote, or are you looking to ask the sponsor to yield? Senator Tedisco? Why do you rise? To ask the sponsor to yield?
The senator yield?
Will
Yes.
the sponsor yield? The sponsor yields.
Just Senator, a little confused about continuous connection. Is there a timetable for a continuous connection of days or weeks or months that you have to spend when you eliminate one registration, then go and move, re-register and vote in another facility you own?
Mr. President, as I was explaining to your colleague, Senator Murray, when he asked a similar question, the courts have determined that it is the voter's intent to return and to maintain connection. At minimum, weekend and country homes satisfied that continuous connection purpose, and that is what the courts have used to interpret litigation around ballots and election residency.
Would the senator yield for another question?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
So I live in a home with my family, and I have another house. I don't go there for 4 years, but every fourth year I come there for a weekend. I re-register, and then I vote for the president in that particular. Is that a reoccurring connection?
Through you, Mr. President, if I'm understanding this hypothetical correctly, you change your voter registration every 4 years, is that
Right.
correct? And it is your intent that that be your primary residence for purposes of voting, correct?
You only come there for a weekend, though. You go back for another 4 years at your other house, then you come back again for a weekend and you vote for the president at this particular facility. Is that a reoccurring connection?
Through you, Mr. President, under the current case law, that is permissible, and that is what this bill would codify.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tedisco. Are there any other senators wishing to be heard? Seeing and hearing none, debate is closed. Secretary will ring the bell. Read the last section.
Section 3, this act shall take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Dabo, Giannaris Kruger, Ort, Sewell Cousins, White.
Announce the results.
In relation to calendar number 6, those senators voted in the negative are Senators Ashby, Borrello, Canzoni Fitzpatrick, Chan, Gallivan, Griffo, Helming, Lanza, Martins, Matera, Murray, Oberacker, O'Mara, Ort, Palumbo, Rhodes, Rollison, Steck, Tedisco, Walzett, Weber, and White. Ayes 39, nays 22.
Bills passed.
Calendar number 8, Senate Print 1087 by Senator Mayer, enactment of the election law.
Senator Walzek, why do you rise?
Go on the bill, and then I'll be asking the sponsor to yield for some questions. if
Senator
that's all
Walzek,
right.
on the bill.
So Hamilton County in New York State has a little over 5,100 residents. In the 2024 presidential election, 3,442 ballots were cast, which is a pretty high propensity. They have 4,600 registered voters, and of those registered voters, 838 of them are registered Democrats. This bill requires each board outside the city, that's a board of elections, outside the city of New York shall consist of 2 election commissioners who shall be full-time employees of such board, except that the county legislative body of a county having a population of more than 120,000 may, by local law, increase the number of such commissioners to 4 to be appointed as provided by this title. Obviously, that piece is not relevant to a county of 5,000. Each of the major political parties shall be eligible to recommend appointment of an equal number of commissioners. Mr. President, would the sponsor yield for some questions?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
Wonderful to speak with you again. We haven't talked about this bill in 2 years, but through you, Mr. President, what is the genesis of this bill? Could you give me a refresher?
Yes. Through you, Mr. President, welcome back, Senator Wolzek. Several years ago, when Senator Myrie was the chair of the Senate Elections Committee, he held a series of hearings around the state with a full membership of the committee, which was composed of both Democrats and Republicans. They made recommendations, and on page, well, my page is cut off, I believe it's 24, on reforms at local boards of election outside New York City. They recommended, I would add, on a bipartisan basis, that commissioners serve in a full-time capacity. That was the original genesis of the bill.
Continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
2 years ago, I asked if the New York State Association of Counties supported this bill. Do you have a memo of support from the Association of Counties?
Through you, Mr. President, I'm not aware of that. I would note that the 2024 legislative agenda of NYSECA, which is the bipartisan group of state election commissioners, clearly says that they have this bill on their agenda, and they note in parentheses bipartisan support.
And through you, Mr. President, would the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Have any county legislators or boards of supervisors of our 62 counties requested this by passing a resolution?
Through you, Mr. President, I'm not aware they have, and I'm not aware they've opposed it.
And through you, Mr. President, would the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Is this an unfunded mandate?
Through you, Mr. President, this would be a requirement of counties outside New York City to have 2 full-time commissioners in order to ensure that there's not a conflict of interest and the need for outside income. Last year, Senator Wolzek wasn't here, and although this bill did not pass both houses, it did pass the Senate, and in our enacted budget, we included $5 million in funding for local boards of elections outside the city of New York. I'm confident that we will make every effort to ensure that there's adequate resources to do this.
The sponsor continue to yield.
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Of that $5 million, has any of that been specifically directed to this cause, to hiring full-time commissioners?
Well, through you, Mr. President, this bill did not pass in the Assembly, so this bill is not yet enacted, and that's why we're considering it here today.
And through you, Mr. President, would the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
How much does a full-time commissioner have to be paid?
Through you, Mr. President, I think it would depend, obviously, on the income and economics of the particular county in which the commissioners are located.
Through you, Mr. President, would the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So would that be up to the county government to determine what the salaries would be for the full-time commissioners that are mandated in this legislation?
Through you, Mr. President, it's not described in the bill.
Through you, Mr. President, would the sponsor continue to yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
What about health insurance or New York State retirement?
Through you, Mr. President, they're not referenced. The point is these are full-time employees, and they would not have the need to have secondary employment.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the bill.
Senator Wolzek on the bill.
So we've talked in the past about a commission on unfunded mandates. It hasn't borne a whole lot of fruit when we talk about that. It would be really nice to have someone in government overseeing all of these mandates that either get funded for a short time and become unfunded over time, or are just straight unfunded mandates from the get-go. Here's how it works. If $5 million is set aside to pay for an elections commissioner, and let me just repeat those numbers, in Hamilton County, New York, you're talking about 4,600 registered voters. You would have a full-time Democratic elections commissioner salaried with benefits for 838 registered Democrats in that county. They could do a house call to every single one of those individuals, meet every single one of them face to face. I don't know what else they would be doing all year, because for a county like Hamilton, there simply is not enough work to justify a full-time position in the Board of Elections, which is why for counties like Hamilton, these mandates are not smart. In the short term, you may negotiate for $5 million in the budget, but how do unfunded mandates happen to our towns, our counties, our villages? We usually throw a little bit of, not always, but we usually throw a little bit of money up front. We say, don't worry, we're going to pay for it. And then eventually the state runs into financial problems. I wonder how that happens. And all of a sudden, we can't pay for those things that we've mandated anymore. We push that on to the local taxpayers. So that will be the direction that this thing ends up anyways. And let's just say, if in Hamilton County's case, let's say we continued to, in a commitment, and we made it in the state constitution, that we will absolutely fund these full-time commissioners for Hamilton County, and those 838 Democrats will have one full-time staffer in Hamilton County working around the clock for them. Let's say we enshrined that in law. That means Hamilton County has never requested this, doesn't need it, doesn't want it. That means that taxpayers from Syracuse or Westchester or somewhere else in the state of New York are putting into that $5 million pot in order to pay for a full-time commissioner for 838 Democrats in Hamilton County. It doesn't make any sense whether the mandate is funded or unfunded. I vote no.
Thank you, Senator Walczak. Are there any other senators wishing to be heard? Seeing and hearing none, debate is closed. Secretary, ring the bell. Read the last section.
Section 2, this action take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Addabbo, Gianaris Kruger, Ortsu, Cousins White.
Senator Mayer to explain her vote.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Walczak, for expressing your views so strongly. One thing I have to point out, there's nothing about the fact that there's only 838 enrolled Democratic voters in Hamilton County that means they don't deserve a full-time commissioner who doesn't have a second job. Same for the Republican enrolled voters in Hamilton County. There's nothing unique about being voters in a rural and small populated county that means they don't deserve the full attention of an election commissioner. This is the basis of our democracy. Their vote, one of the 838 Democratic voters, counts as much as a voter from Brooklyn, Bronx, or Yonkers, and they are entitled to the full devotion of the election commissioners, both Democratic and Republican, who have a full-time job making sure that the elections are conducted in a responsible way and do not have a conflict of interest. There's nothing unique about a rural voter that makes them less entitled to the full attention of an election commissioner. I vote aye.
Senator Mayer to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Helming to explain her vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before us today, there are a number of elections bills, but what's missing is a voter ID bill. Various polls show that Americans strongly support requiring a photo ID to vote. The Pew Research Center shows 81% of Americans favor requiring people to show government-issued photo identification to vote. The Gallup poll, released in October of 2024, shows 84% of Americans support requiring a photo ID to vote.
Senator Helming, are your comments related to Senator Mayer's bill?
They absolutely are. I'm getting there. Within my 2 minutes. 36 states require some sort of ID to vote, including the 2 states that were mentioned as the gold standard, if you will, for the establishment of county polling places, Indiana and Utah. People of all ages, including young people, are used to carrying and showing an ID. We all know about all the purchases that require an ID to make. You have to have an ID to cash a check, to access medical care, to travel, to register for classes, and a whole lot more. I co-sponsor a bill that Senator Ort carries that will require voters to present a valid photo ID. This bill eliminates financial barriers to those who need help getting an ID. This package of election bills ignores what the majority of people want, voters to show identification prior to voting.
Senator Helming, how do your comments relate to the bill at hand?
Is an unfunded
Senator
mandate.
Helming, you have mentioned other bills in the
no.
package.
And I just mentioned that this bill
is an unfunded
mandate, and for that reason,
please,
I will be voting no.
Please explain your vote in relation to the bill that is before the House. It is clearly delineated in the Senate rules. Nothing you indicated, Senator Helming, with all due respect, had anything to do with Senator Mayer's bill. Senator Lanza.
Mr. President, what I would add is that each of us, when we vote either in the affirmative or negative, we have our own unique reasons for doing so. And for Senator Helming, if the reason why she's voting against this bill is because it doesn't include something or because it includes something that she doesn't believe belongs there, it's within her prerogative and every member's prerogative to explain their vote in the way they see fit.
Senator Lanza, as you know, we're just trying to keep the order of the House. Announce the results.
In relation to calendar 8, those senators voted in the negative are Senators Ashby, Borrello, Kazan Fitzpatrick, Chan, Gallivan, Griffo, Helming, Lanza, Martins, Matera, Murray, Oberacker, O'Mara, Ort, Palumbo, Rhodes, Rollison, Steck, Tedisco, Walzett, Weber, and White. Ayes 39, nays 22.
The bill is passed.
Calendar number 9, Senate Print 1356 by Senator Skoufis, an act to amend the election law and the vehicle and traffic law.
Senator Lanza, why do you rise?
Mr. President, I believe there's an amendment at the desk. I waive the reading of that amendment and ask that you recognize Senator Walzek, who is wasting no time to be heard.
Thank you, Senator Lanza. Upon review of this amendment in accordance with Rule 6, Section 4B, I unfortunately rule it non-germane out of order at this time.
Accordingly, Mr. President, I appeal the ruling of the chair and ask that Senator Walzek indeed be recognized.
The appeal has been made and recognized, and Senator Walzek may be heard.
Mr. President, it's not the first time that we've disagreed on the germaneness, and I hope to sway my colleagues and maybe even you. This bill in chief amends election law in relation to joining a multi-state voter maintenance organization. Now, there is nothing that would serve us better than having accurate data to be able to give to that multi-state voter maintenance organization or organizations to be able to work with other states. And as my colleague recently pointed out, 36 states have taken up voter ID law because they're taking their voter data very seriously. A Gallup poll, so I offer this amendment because a Gallup poll showed that 84% of Americans support voter ID. That includes 67% of registered Democrats and 84% of registered independent voters. Some of those states include states like red states, Texas and Florida. Some of them blue states, like Washington and Connecticut, or purple states, if you love to color states, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Georgia, which has some of the strictest voter ID laws. But I know that these are all red, white, and blue states because in the United States of America, people believe in enfranchisement. They want their vote to count. They want their elections secure. They're asking overwhelmingly for voter ID. This bill is, not only is my amendment germane, but overwhelmingly New Yorkers want voter ID laws on the books in New York State. And I challenge my colleagues to accept this amendment because some of the things that have been thrown out there, reasons why we can't do voter ID, even though 84% of American voters support it, are because it will, suppress some of the vote. Well, 36 other states have done it. None of the results show that the vote was suppressed in those states. Or it's disenfranchisement. Actually, when people have the confidence that their vote is going to count, and when voters have the confidence that these elections are secure, you do nothing but increase the confidence to get out there and vote, and that's what the results have shown. This isn't me making it up. I know we're the first. In New York State, we're the first. We get out there and do things. We're either the first or the last. We get out there and we do things before all of the other states do them. So we pontificate about how these election laws are going to change things. And we guess and we strategize, and then we debate them, sometimes in committees. Sometimes the committee meetings are canceled, so we just debate them in this chamber. But here we don't have to guess. 36 states have them on the books. Voter ID is working in 36 states. Democrats, Republicans, independents, registered voters across America love voter ID. And your Election Day package today missed it. So on the last bill, I've offered this they call it a hostile amendment, Mr. President, but I would call this a very helpful amendment. Please pass voter ID. Vote on the germaneness of this bill. Let's get it done. The people want it. It's the right way to secure our elections. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Walzek. I want to remind the House that this vote is on the procedures of the House and the ruling of the chair. Those in favor of overruling the chair signify by saying aye. Aye. Show of hands has been requested and so ordered. Announce the results.
Ayes 22.
The ruling of the chair stands and the bill in chief is before the House. Read the last section.
Section 5, this act shall take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Addabbo, Gianaris Kruger, Ortsu, Cousins White.
Announce the results.
Ayes 61.
The bill is passed. Senator Gianaris, that completes the reading of the controversial calendar.
Is there any further business at the desk?
There is no further business at the desk.
I move to adjourn until tomorrow, Tuesday, January 14th at 11 a.m.
On motion, the Senate stands adjourned until Tuesday, January 14th at 11 a.m.